Yes, thank you very much. I will very briefly explain where I'm coming from. I'm Italian from Turin, the city where Luci d'Artista artist's light was introduced first 25 years ago. I worked for 10 years at Philips Design as a director in the strategic design practice and studying the future together with the team of Stefano Marzano, Yasu Kusume, Eric Quint, and various other talents. I'm independent for 12.5 years exactly. I contributed to the urban lighting futures programs of Signify as independent with the municipality of Eindhoven, where I live. I worked as a consultant with Lighting Design Collective with Tapio Rosenius and his partners, and I'm currently on the scientific committee of the Enlighten Me project of the European Union led by the University of Bologna. So this is a little bit my background. I'm a sociologist, so referring to the City's Guide to Smart Lighting, I'm addressing specifically the social and societal side of lighting. I work about the future. I work with a constructivist approach, so very qualitative and very design research based. I will refer mainly to this book that was printed a couple of years ago, well, actually in 2014, with Tapio Rosenius as a co-author, and it's a survey of the program we ran together with Philips Lighting at the time, Signify, in Europe and Middle East. So it's a program that ran for 5 years, and I selected 3 concepts as examples to make my point and to critically reflect about these visions of the future. I have authored in the past the book City People Light together with Fernand Pereira and Maximilian Fenske at the time with Philips. So the idea is to get into society, to get into the context, to get into the field, to co-create with professionals visions of the future. These vision of the futures, these concepts of the future, today I'm going to introduce to you with 3 examples, but also to critically reflect, because sometimes has gone by, some peer-reviewed publications have been printed, and it's I'm also in the position not only to show you examples of my work, but to critically reflect on what was good and what was less good in the work we did in the face of Corona. So I will now share my screen. Yes. Basically, my work is about identifying hypotheses for the future on the planet. How could the future look like? How could we anticipate the future? How could we co-create preferable futures? What you're going to see. Unfortunately, the presentation does not. Oh, okay, perfect. What you're going to see is an example of a concept that was co-created in the city of Wrocław in Poland, European Capital of Culture 2016. It was created by a large team of architects, designers, managers, facilitated by Philips Lighting Poland, Dorota Slawińska, now it's Signify Poland. This underpass is normally pitch dark, was normally pitch dark, as it was
recording in progress.
As it was designed in a part of town where it acts like a sort of coronary bypass between squares and avenues, but since it is an underprivileged part of town, it's kept normally dark. The experiment here, the concept, the idea is simply to bring light to the underpass. This area is normally considered not really ideal to walk at night. It's considered dangerous. It's considered unappealing for families to walk by. And what you see is that when we, together with the teams of Signify Poland, lit up the sort of mock-up prototype of how the underpass would look like with the benefit of playful light, all of a sudden it became a kindergarten for the children and the kids of the neighborhood at night. And it really changed its function. Not only it was, again, just like it is during the day, a passage, a connection between different parts of town, but it became really owned by the people. I think in post-corona times, the social function of urban lighting is definitely crucial. Also, what appears crucial is the fact that the intervention by the team of lighting designers and architectural students here respected the heritage of the city of Wrocław. This is a sketch of the concept that was created by the workshop participants, and you can see how the highlight of the concept goes in terms of aesthetics to the top of the arch here. This top of the arch is a vernacular architecture. It's typical of the area of Silesia, of Wrocław, which is an area between Germany and Poland. It's a sort of aesthetic identity trait of the city, and the designers really put a spotlight on it. So the combination of lighting facilitating a social gathering, a socializing function, plus the respect of the heritage, the respect of the identity. And in these terms, I remember in 2010 I visited Seoul, World Design Capital. I remember the work that was done at the level of urban design to recuperate the identity of the city and the history of the city. These are the two traits that I think will drive, from a point of view of social and cultural trends and demand, the development of urban light and urban lighting. This is on the same square in Poland. It's the same team. And I like to show this concept in terms of storytelling. It's replacing a statue that was removed by the Russian army in 1945, at the time when they came into the Polish country after the occupation of the Germans, replacing this military monument with beams of light. So it's a very likable storytelling, because basically in this square that is normally pitch dark, what you see is these two beams of light that virtually stand among what we call the symphony of nature. So among the highlight of the trees and of the nature of the square. And again, I have to stress the fact that besides this experimental design workshop, this square is normally pitch dark. So normally you would have the nighttime dark on the square. Here the focus went on the nature, and the message was about peace. So the focus went on the frame around the monument. So this is the foundation of the monument that was removed. It was a German military monument. These are the trees that you saw, and in this area there is the socializing, the kind of opportunity for people to sit and to drink together and to socialize. Well, the thing here is that as much as we like peace and we like aesthetic use of lighting, we learned, this was 2012, we learned after a couple of years that these beams of light are really bad for the dark sky, of course, for birds. There have been documentaries, there have been papers documenting the negative impact of this kind of aesthetic use of light. I like to report this concept because, of course, the designers and the architects and the students were in total good intention at the time. Because of the New York City Memorial, it was quite fashionable to have these kind of solutions. But actually, it's an example of how good ideas for innovation turned out to be very bad ideas. And luckily, this was just a mock-up for one night. It was not installed. Otherwise, it would have been very bad for birds and very bad for the preservation of the night sky. There are several examples of how this kind of innovation ideas look very flashy, very artistic. Here in Eindhoven, we had an example of a highway with self-illuminating, self-lighting concrete prototype by Dan Rosengard and Heijmans. In that case, it was a very visible, very newsworthy kind of concept, but it did not work. And if you do a bit of research, you can find that very often behind this kind of concepts where light and lighting are steered towards aesthetic use, towards the wow effect, you have negative impact. So, of course, this kind of use of light and lighting fits into society, into culture, because all the things we see are part of our material base for culture. However, I think that the direction where our ego as human beings, our mindset of imposing an aesthetic use of resources on the planet will decrease in appeal because of the sustainable demand from younger generations, the climate change and the impact. So I used to love the concept. I still like very much the storytelling, especially these days when we have a war in Europe. But I like to have a critical reflection on this kind of innovation where aesthetics are leading. The last concept comes from Glasgow, and it's a very arty concept. This was created by a mixed team of guests of the workshop, partly British, partly Polish. And here light, urban light and lighting lose the function to provide illumination and become a sort of art installation purely for the purpose of getting people together. This became also the cover of our book with Tapio Rosenius, which we printed on behalf of Philips Lighting and of Signify. I think this concept stresses the need again for social aggregation, but also the need for symbolic, for deeper use of lighting, of illumination beyond the pure functional, not in a monumental aesthetic drive as the square we just saw, but with the focus on enabling and facilitating people to gather together. So a couple of words on the methodology behind these concepts. It is based on workshops. The workshops are were planned. This is the Rector's Palace in Dubrovnik. The workshops were planned all over Europe across 5 years by Philips Lighting, now Signify, with Tapio Rosenius and me as facilitators. The workshops have been very important. I wrote a PhD about City People Light programs. The workshops were very important as creative moment, but also as a moment of social gathering, a little bit like this event in Seoul. There is the dimension where you exchange knowledge, but there is also the dimension where you perform socially in your function, in your professional status, networking, getting recognition, giving recognition. The second dimension is the dimension of networking and connecting. And in the case of this latest book, I interviewed before the workshops and before the projects a number of architects and experts. You might recognize Samir Bantal, who is the director of AMO at Office for Metropolitan Architecture. So he's the director of research for Rem Koolhaas. You might recognize Astrid Pieber, who is the partner for Germany and Asia of UN Studio. Beata Urbanovic and Kathy Johnston are city managers. Hans Momas is the head of the Central Planning Bureau of the Dutch government and a professor in leisure. Paolo Verri and Kari Kortman have been the director of Torino World Design Capital Communications, and Kari is the director of the Helsinki Design Week. So before getting into co-creation, we try to understand the future in the view of experts, of leaders. In 2000 and for 2014, I interviewed these experts. In 2006, for an earlier global cycle of City People Light, I spoke with top people in urban architecture. So the panel here was in a way more based on top expertise, but also more focused, more specific on architecture. This kind of research, preliminary research, is fed into a system of metrics, tools, and this enables the concepts that you have seen before to be positioned in a very clear frame that corrects the design, research, and constructivist approach that we chose. This methodology is scalable, and we scaled it with Tapio Rosenius, with Think in a Tank. So what you have seen so far is part of my former collaboration with Signify and Philips. Think in a Tank was a cycle of events at the Helsinki Design Week at Silo 468, which is the iconic oil tank redesigned with 2012 little holes and lights, where basically the nighttime light mimics the light of the day in Helsinki in this icon. And here with Tapio Rosenius, we scaled, we changed slightly the approach, we made it slightly more focused on younger architects, younger designers, the new generation of designers. Here you see the participants of the 2016 edition. We also included moments of immersion and experiential reflection with classical music. Of course, the silo is a sort of a humdrum. But in the end, we printed a year ago a paper on World Future Review, which is a leading journal in future research, edited in the past by Jim Dator and now by John Sweeney. What is interesting as directions of identified from this second cycle of research we did is that we did not only reflect on light and lighting from the point of view of the metropolis, of buildings, of objects, but also how light and lighting works on the body. And this connects very nicely to the Enlighten Me project that is studying the impact of lighting on senior citizens. We tried to understand hypotheses of future developments where light beyond electric lighting, beyond urban lighting, would work in synergy, perhaps even originated by the human body. We really looked into scenarios for what John Sweeney defines as post-normal times, times of very great complexity, and basically you can take into account that we did the research between 2014 and 2016. We printed in 2019, so before the pandemics, but we already identified at that time the need to think in post-normal models, which is a way to express how we cannot apply linear thinking to future developments. And there is a very interesting book by John Sweeney from the 2014-15 describing this line of thinking. I stop sharing to conclude, and I would like to conclude with a sort of design direction that is beyond lighting. It's the life-centered design approach by Bruce Mau. I interviewed Bruce 1 year ago, and I will interview him in 2 weeks on occasion of the publication of his new book, The Nexus, the new convergence of art, technology, and science, with Julio Mario Ottino. Bruce has written a lot of books. Bruce Mau is a leading designer. Mau MC24 a couple of years ago, and around 20 years ago, Massive Change. Basically, Bruce, besides being a friend, he defined this notion of life-centered design. So a design approach that incorporates the environment, the other species, the context, the planet in the design concept, in the design process. I think this is the way forward. So not so much design of light and lighting icons, aesthetic wow effects, but a design school, a design discipline that looks at the context, at the planet, at the birds, at nature, and integrates in the design process the needs, the demands, the priorities of these inhabitants of our planet. I think this design approach, life-centered design, will definitely mark our future and is our hope, our way forward through the present crisis and out of the pandemic crisis as well, since we still don't know how it originated. Well, this is more or less what I wanted to share with you today. If you have questions or if there is now, there are a few minutes for the Q&A, and I would be very happy to engage with you.
Maybe the facade.
Facade.
Facade lighting.
Yes, well, we had several concepts related to facades, especially in Eastern Europe, where this surface is particularly beloved. In the Scandinavian countries, it was more about the contours of the buildings, for example, whereas in Poland it was really very enthusiastic ideas about the facades and the sort of presentation of the building. I have to say the applicability has been demonstrated. There is in Seoul in the early 2000s you had a shopping mall, a department store called Galleria, I think, and that was a concept by Rogier van der Heijden of Arup, where the skin of the building, the facade, and the whole building became a huge media machine. And this was achieved around 2002 with customized solutions. One of the companies I've been consulting is Ren Electronica in the Netherlands, and they are sort of maverick geniuses of making things that are otherwise impossible. So in that case, Rogier van der Heijden came up with this idea. The technology was just there. It was not developed yet. He was helped by, I think, at the time by Philips to make it happen. And this concept was, this idea was visible in 1996 in this book, in the first City People Light book. This doesn't mean that Rogier copied the idea or that the designers who wrote the 1996 City People Light book, where I was not involved, somehow had the idea, but it was not applicable. When you study the future, you come across concepts, ideas that might or might not be applicable. For example, the idea of a self-reflecting highway. In 2006, I recorded it in a workshop in Shanghai with guests from Asia, and it was very, very clear and very, very valuable. And it was realized as a prototype a few years later by Dan Rosengart. So the ideas are applicable. Sometimes they are not 100% feasible yet. They are based on roadmaps of technology. And definitely the facade lighting is a very important field. It will change as well, though, because I think that the climate change and the need to rethink our relationship with the dark sky and the night will bring substantial change to facade lighting design. Probably also not in the line of these concepts, because these concepts are 2014. We will see things change. I see a question from my friend Rick van Stiepel. Hello, Rick. I think colored light in public lighting is an established fact. It's a technological it's not only possible, it's almost automatic with LED technology that you can achieve it. I think it is an important switch, equivalent to the switch from black and white TV to color TV, and it will definitely stay. But I think it will stay in a more mature way. It will grow. It's a little bit like when you give the first moped or motorcycle to a teenager, then there is a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excess, a lot of show off. I think we will mature in the way we approach color light in public settings. We will go into understanding how color light, like in the last concept I presented, how colored light can play functions that are social, that are cultural, and how color light can work for the benefit of people. So, for example, like we have seen and we will see with the Enlighten Me project, how color light could help in functional, aesthetic, cultural ways, weaker groups in society. So in that case, the senior citizens. So that I would see as the possibility.
Hello, Marco.
Is there a last question? Hi, Mark. Hi.
Hey,
Thank you for inviting
from
me.
Seoul. I mean, it's been wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. Your speech was very, very interesting. There's lots of things we can take from there. So thank you very much. It's been wonderful. I have a question for you, but I won't ask it right now because we don't have time and you have to run to your students. But
my students can wait.
No, it's okay. But I will write it by email. But it was super, super great to have you.
Well,
Marco.
I will be very. I think the work LUCI is doing is really hugely important. I refer again to the booklet that is a sort of Bible in a few pages, and I will be very, very happy to rejoin and to meet you again. And if any in the audience likes to get in touch, please feel free to ask Mark and LUCI my directions, and LUCI members are always very welcome in my inbox and for further dialogue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Marco.